Welcome back to the systematic teardown of the late Duane Gish's children's propaganda book, Dinosaurs by Design. For those of you who missed the first video, it's located in the description. Where we last left off, Duane was proposing that humans and dinosaurs lived together based off of the verses in the Bible's Book of Job. They didn't. We see a page that concerns the history of the word dinosaur, and finally we chug onward into page after page of dinosaur spotlights. There really isn't much to note, and it's all decently accurate, until we get to page 49 with Allosaurus. Gish mentions an excavation in 1940 where 30 to 40 Allosaurus were found dead together, and then proposes that the flood is
the best explanation.
Let's back up a moment. A mass gravesite for extinct animals does not necessitate a worldwide flooding event, and paleontologists have actually done quite a bit of work at this site. So what do they think? The Cleveland Lloyd Dinosaur Quarry in Utah is the location of this find, and a recent study suggests that the location itself was actually an ephemeral water body millions of years ago that was the final resting place for animals that died nearby. So, okay, what's an ephemeral water body? It's actually just a lake or a pond that is only present for some of the year. Periodic floods during certain seasons wash corpses and debris into a low-lying area, and this creates, as the author describes, quote, significant numbers of rotting dinosaurs in a body of standing water, unquote. In turn, we get what is called hypereutrophic conditions, in which bacteria and certain types of algae thrive, creating a festering dead zone for all other kinds of life. Well, okay, cool. Sounds good to me, but how do we know that this is the case, rather than a global worldwide flood placing these allosaurs here? What evidence do we have for the ephemeral pond hypothesis? Well, it seems to explain the accumulation and condition of the allosaur remains and why there are so few other vertebrates present. Additional evidence to support this putrid pond idea are as follows. The first is geochemistry. The deposition area of the site is enriched in heavy metals and sulfide minerals, which are not present in the surrounding formation or in other fossil bone beds. The presence of sulfides and calcite nodules suggests that hypereutrophic conditions were present, resulting in a concentration of heavy metals as the animals decomposed. To put it simply, the chemical characteristics of the rocks tell us about its past as a putrid pond. The second is evidence of bone abrasion. The allosaur bones show varying degrees of exposure to the elements and the nibbling of scavengers, something that would have been quite difficult if the entire area were underwater due to a worldwide flood. This also supports the idea that there were several small flooding events before the bones were entirely covered. And finally, using the evidence about the climate conditions of the time, which can be obtained from rocks, it appears that this area in Utah was subjected to periods of dryness interspersed with, quote, weak monsoons and subhumid conditions among stronger monsoons, similar to the climates we see in modern savannas, unquote. This supports the idea that the carcasses accumulated during flood events and then periodically dried out, leaving a horrible pit of rotting flesh in a toxic pool. So it looks like the global flood hypothesis is all washed up. But the best is yet to come when we turn the page and are greeted with this absolute treat. Introducing Evolutionary Fairy Tales.
Oh boy.
Admittedly, there's some cute art here. I mean, look at this guy. What a grumpus. But no level of cuteness can distract from the absolute dumpster fire that is in the text.
If you asked an evolutionist to describe from what the dinosaurs evolved, he wouldn't know how to answer. No one has ever found even a trace of an ancestor for any of the dinosaurs, flying reptiles or marine reptiles. Creationists, of course, believe God created them just the way they were on Earth.
He's out of control.
The next page, Ancestors of Birds, is so dumb and dishonest I want to throw myself into oncoming traffic.
Fossil hunters are very frustrated that they have not been able to find any transitional forms, or in-between kinds, that they should be able to find if evolution were true. Instead, each one of the many kinds of dinosaurs appear in the fossil record, already complete, as if they came out of nowhere, just as you would expect if God had created them.
No transitional dinosaurs? That doesn't sound right. Gish takes this opportunity to double down on his claims, specifically with birds. Not only are there no transitional fossils from dinosaurs to birds, he claims, but there are no dinosaurs with feathers. Oh, really, Duane? There are no transitional birds? That's kind of interesting. Then he hits us with the flagship argument about Archaeopteryx not being a transitional form between dinosaurs and birds. You know, this guy. Let's talk about exactly why Archaeopteryx is a transitional form. First, I suppose we should clarify what we mean by transitional form. This is simply a fossil specimen that shares traits with both its ancestors and its descendants. So for a fossil to be transitional between dinosaurs and birds, it must have some dinosaur traits and some bird traits. So let's look at our list in comparison to Archaeopteryx. This table compares theropods, dinosaurs like tyrannosaurs, allosaurs, and raptors, to Archaeopteryx, strictly on skeletal structure similarities. Theropods have bony tails, perforated skulls with teeth, gastralia, which are rib formations exclusive to dinosaurs, and theropod-specific vertebra, shoulders, pelvises, and ankles. They also have a short halix. Now let's examine the traits of Archaeopteryx. It has a bony tail just like theropods do, but the tail is short and rigid. It has teeth like theropods, but they're not serrated. It has a big toe that's fully reversed, which is more of a bird-like trait, and it also has a wishbone, a fused collarbone, and modern bird shoulders. It also has modern feather symmetry, suggesting that it likely knew how to fly. So is it a theropod, or is it a bird? Well, it seems to be smack dab in the middle, and that's kind of the point. The reason Archaeopteryx lithographica is transitional is supported by its many mosaic traits that place it as more advanced than those previously mentioned theropods, but still primitive in comparison to modern birds. Effects of sin. Effects of sin? Gish then proposes that the fall of man, or the sinning of humans in the Garden of Eden, is the event responsible for carnivores having to kill and consume other organisms in order to survive. Of course, the next question is, where are all the predators that look like this? Rather than... Gish rounds this out by pointing out that pandas and gorillas have sharp canines, but are herbivores or omnivores. Just one problem, Duane. We can actually tell what an animal eats by its teeth. This is the skull of an omnivore. To be specific, it's a coyote skull. Notice that in the back, you have molars. They're grinding teeth because this animal is not an obligate carnivore. This, on the other hand, is a shark jaw. It's an obligate carnivore similar to the theropod dinosaurs we've been talking about, such as tyrannosaurs, allosaurs, and raptors. And it couldn't eat vegetables if it tried. Its teeth are built for shearing and slicing, which would make grinding vegetables up quite difficult. So this animal could survive eating fruits and vegetables alone, theoretically, if its gut microflora would allow for it. But this animal never could. It would starve to death. And this is what we're talking about when we're insinuating that Allosaurs and Tyrannosaurs used to be vegetarians. They didn't. With this in mind, the carnivores of Eden would have had to look like this, and I don't think we found any fossils that reflect this reality. We get some chapters on the flood and Noah's Ark, and also a comparison of different cultures that also had flood stories. Of course, they also all have stories about dragons and demigods and shapeshifters, but I don't think that necessarily makes them legitimate. In What Happened to the Dinosaurs, Gish tries to roundabout the Chicxulub asteroid impact by asking the question, how did mammals, birds, and other small reptiles manage to survive? Because they're small, Duane. They're small, could avoid the heat, and didn't necessarily subsist solely on terrestrial plants. Okay, I know what you're thinking. But how do we know this? How do we know that it was an asteroid impact? Thanks to our friend iridium. Iridium is a rare element on Earth, but it is abundant in meteorites and asteroids. When a stellar object hits our planet's surface, soil and debris from the asteroid are shot into the atmosphere, left to drift back down as a sort of ashfall. This same kind of thing can happen during a volcanic eruption, and we can tell if certain areas experience the impact of volcanism if we find a hardened layer of ash in the geologic column. If we go back to the secular date of 65 million years ago in the rock record, anywhere around the world we can find a layer of iridium, a component of asteroids. This means that the impact that eradicated the dinosaurs ejected enough iridium into the atmosphere to make it around the entire globe, and that means the whole planet likely experienced a sort of long-term ash blackout, killing off many C4 plants and contributing to the dinosaurs' demise. In addition, if we date the iridium layer, we get the same results as if we date the Chicxulub crater. That means that the two are likely correlated. Duane, though, suggests that the dinosaurs went extinct due to the global flood. And at last, we reach my favorite part of the book, the part where Duane Gish suggests that the reason many cultures have stories of fire-breathing dragons is because Parasaurolophus breathed fire. You know, like how beetles do it. He also suggests that the dragon King George fought was also a dinosaur. Gotta have a reason for bringing two of every dinosaur on the ark, I guess. We then cover mysterious creatures in order to try and discredit evolution, again, with the idea of living fossils, which don't discredit evolution. And finally, we get some more IRL monsters, including one of the more famous ones, the Zuyo Maru plesiosaur. It's a basking shark. But we do get a very fun story at the end of the book about a German U-boat blowing up a marine reptile. Dinosaurs by Design is wrought with misinformation, even for 1996. And with Duane Gish's education, although he's by no means a specialist in paleontology or biology, he should at least have been trained in academic integrity, which this book lacks in spades. It would be somewhat akin to housing a flat earth conspiracy novel with how much blatant misrepresentation of well-known science is present. And keep in mind, this was 1996. It wasn't like it was the Stone Age. Gish had a PhD in biochemistry. He should have at least been aware of some of this stuff. Because remember, this is being presented to children from an authority figure. And even if it isn't your field, if you're going to write a book on it, you should at least have some cursory knowledge of the subject, which Gish either lacks and is thus ignorant, or he is intentionally misrepresenting the consensus of multiple fields of science. And there's just too many falsehoods to chalk up exclusively to misinformation. It's troubling that this book was so easily accessible in a library, even in a private Christian school, for kids to read. Belief systems can be compatible with mainstream science, just ask the majority of Americans. But you can't go around rejecting well-established science because your interpretation of a deeply vague and versatile text disagrees with it. That makes you look foolish. And when you pass it on to children, that makes you dangerous.